Thank you for joining us for another Growth Masters Federal presentation on growing your business in the federal marketplace. Whether you're just getting started or already doing business with the federal government, today's topic will be of interest to companies who want to learn more about the pros and cons of being a prime, a sub, or a partner in a joint venture. Growth Masters Federal is a nationwide community of growth-oriented government contractors, their executive teams, and the professionals who support them. The purpose is to share experiences and discuss timely topics on planning and executing the most effective growth strategies in the very challenging but opportunity-rich federal marketplace. We're broadcasting today from the greater Washington, D.C. area, and we welcome our viewers from around the country. If you're watching a moderated presentation of this webinar, we invite you to submit your questions using the tools on your screen. Otherwise, please send your questions by email to questions@scaletomarket.com or give us a call at the number listed on our website. Registered viewers will receive an email with the link to view the webinar on demand and a brief survey asking for your feedback on the presentation. Please take a minute to reply and tell us what you think so we can serve you better in the future. So with those housekeeping chores taken care of, let's get started. Your host for today's presentation is Shirley Collier. Shirley's the president and founder of Scale to Market and has been working in the federal sector as an entrepreneur, author, speaker, and consultant for over 25 years. Enjoy the presentation.
Hello, this is Shirley, and thank you for joining us today. After selling my last business in 2012, I decided to focus on what I enjoyed the most: helping senior executives with strategic planning and profitable growth. But what I found is that most small businesses really struggle with business development, especially in the complex, highly regulated federal sector. So I figured that if I could help my clients solve the business development riddle and bring in more revenue, then there would be capital to invest in the business. Now I come in through the business development door, but I take a very holistic CEO perspective on all the plates that must be kept spinning for sustainable, profitable growth. We need to back up just a bit before diving into our discussion of teaming. Before making a decision to prime, sub, or JV, you first need to know your market. So in this brief introduction to some very complex topics, we will begin with a review of the basics of market research. Then we can move on to the various options for creating opportunity-specific partnerships, or teaming for short. And finally, we will discuss the pros and cons of each of these options. Just a reminder, if you are listening to a moderated presentation, I encourage you to submit questions as we proceed. If not, please send your questions to us at questions@scaletomarket.com, and we will respond promptly. We have identified 4 categories of best practices used by successful government contractors. The first is that they have a data-driven, detailed, customized business development playbook. The second is that they delegate authority to their BD team. Third, they articulate a clear vision both internally and externally to the company. And fourth, they evaluate their plans and are ready and willing to pivot with the market. Today's topic on when to prime, when to sub, and when to form a joint venture is a subset of the BD playbook best practice. An essential first step in BD decision-making is to gather objective, relevant data. I will not attempt to cover this subject in depth today, but let's briefly examine the different categories of data and the primary resources used to search for and analyze opportunities and to find potential teaming partners. The 3 categories are agency forecast, or annual projections of agency procurement plans, recompetes, or existing contracts that are expiring and may come up for recompete or be issued under different contract vehicles, and solicitations. So let's break those down to the next level of detail. To obtain forecast of upcoming spending, you can go to agency websites, their small business offices, online or in person, or the GSA forecast website shown here. All federal agencies are supposed to upload their forecast to this GSA website, but of course they don't always do that. So many times you'll have to go to the specific agency website to find their procurement forecast for the upcoming fiscal year. These forecasts are normally available between November and about February of each year, just after the beginning of the fiscal year. However, if the federal budget has not been approved by Congress and we are operating on continuing resolutions, or if the agency simply doesn't place a high priority on fulfilling this obligation, the forecast may be late, or they may not be posted at all. This year, for example, many procurement forecasts were not posted until April. What is important to note about forecasts is that they are not commitments. It's just what's been approved in their budget for the fiscal year. The next category is recompetes. When searching for opportunities, you must consider the past as well as the future, so examining existing contracts is critical. The federal government records and makes data available on all contract actions of $3,000 or more, but a lot of that data is in the form of BPA calls and task orders on large contracts, and cross-referencing this data can be challenging. The basic procurement data is published in FPDS-NG, which stands for Federal Procurement Data System Next Generation. You can see the link here. Subscription services, which we'll talk about more in a minute, include existing contracts in their search engines, and many distinguish themselves from their competitors by collecting data from a wide range of sources and providing research and analysis of that data. Finally, we have solicitations. Those sources are FBO, or FedBizOps, GWACs, government-wide acquisition contracts and agency-specific websites, SBA Subnet for contracting opportunities, and eBuy if you have a GSA schedule. In theory, FedBizOps, or FBO, aggregates contracting opportunities over $25,000 across all federal agencies into one system with a unified interface. At least that's the goal. However, not all opportunities are advertised on FBO. For example, the FAA is not covered by FAR and usually has its own acquisition system and rules. Many divisions of the Department of Defense also have their own procurement and solicitation processes and systems. And all GWACs, IDIQs, and BPAs have closed solicitation systems for task orders. FBO should be used to monitor announcements like industry days and other events, opportunities in the market research phase, for which there will be sources sought notifications and RFIs issued, and for the release of RFPs that you've been preparing for. At one point, the GSA schedule was touted as being the future of all government purchasing. It now represents less than 10% of government contracts. The federal government's current procurement trend is toward category management, which includes GWACs, BPAs, and IDIQs. But that's a topic for another webinar. This trend is for cost-cutting purposes. It is easier for a contracting officer to manage one $100 million contract than 10 $10 million contracts. The point here is that these sources exist today, and savvy contractors have learned to mine them all. And of course, there are paid subscriptions like EasyGovOps that we like to use, and others such as GovWin, GovEni, and GovTribe that aggregate much of this data for easy access, analysis, and decision-making based on custom searches and automated notifications. These services can perform a critical function, enabling you to focus your staff and limited resources on pursuing qualified opportunities. So these are the primary data sources. It's your responsibility to synthesize this information, incorporate it into your BD strategy, and determine whether you want to prime, join a team as a sub, or form a joint venture to go after those opportunities. It is what successful government contractors do. Now let's discuss when and why companies should team. We'll begin with prime contractors. Teaming enhances their competitive posture and adds new opportunities in agencies where they do not already have contacts or a presence. Teaming allows primes to share performance risks, although they have privity, meaning they are still responsible to the government. Teaming allows primes, and subs for that matter, to build past performance in new skill areas. And the last reason is that primes have small business subcontracting requirements they must fulfill. And so they are always searching for small, competent contractors they can work with to fulfill those requirements. For subcontractors, there are several reasons to consider a teaming relationship. It provides a way to capture new business with less risk, especially financial risk. Proposal development can be very costly. Subcontracting can increase market access by leveraging the prime's relationships and knowledge. Companies may choose to subcontract because they are ineligible to prime. They just don't have the quals, either past performance, scope of skills required, or the organizational infrastructure to prime a given contract. And the last reason to subcontract is to learn new skills and build past performance. And finally, the reason both primes and subs want to partner is because the government encourages it, and so they look favorably on proposals with strong, diverse teams. It is important to understand the regulatory limitations on teaming. Let's begin by looking at the ostensible subcontractor rule. Under this rule, an improperly structured teaming arrangement can cause the companies to be deemed affiliated by the SBA and thereby lose their ability to compete for the contract. Let's examine the elements of a teaming arrangement that could get you in trouble. The rule could apply if the subcontractor performs what is deemed to be the primary and vital requirements of a contract. The prime must control and provide daily management of the contract, and the prime must be solely responsible for performance under the contract. The rule may apply if the prime contractor is unusually reliant on the subcontractor. The government is particularly sensitive to this when the prime is small and the sub is large. This rule does not apply to similarly situated entities. For example, if two or more small businesses, 8As, women-owned small businesses, SDVOSBs, or hub zone companies win a contract under a teaming arrangement, the rule does not apply. For making this determination, all aspects of the relationship between the prime and the subcontractor are considered by the government, including but not limited to the terms of the proposal, such as contract management, technical responsibilities of each partner, and the percentage of the subcontracted work, agreements between the prime and subcontractor, such as bonding assistance or the teaming agreement, and whether the subcontractor is the incumbent contractor and is now ineligible to compete as a prime. There's a new rule on how subcontracting percentages are calculated. These are the rates allowed on various products and services. They used to be calculated based upon labor rates. However, these percentages are now calculated based on the total price paid by the government. So, for example, on a $10 million contract, of which $8 million is for services, $4 million can be subcontracted. We're going to pause here for a moment to allow our moderators to catch their breath and review the questions that have been submitted so far. We'll be back shortly, so stay tuned.
Today's presentation is brought to you by Scale to Market, and your host is Shirley Collier. Scale to Market helps businesses think, plan, collaborate, and prosper in the federal marketplace by developing and executing data-driven business development playbooks. We thank you for participating and encourage you to submit questions and comments to the moderators or by email to questions@scaletomarket.com. Now back to our webinar on when to prime, when to sub, and when to form a joint venture.
Hello and welcome back. Earlier I referenced similarly situated entities. Let's take a closer look at that aspect of teaming. Small businesses can now use work performed by their subs to meet contract set-aside requirements. This was not always the case. It used to be that the prime had to meet the set-aside requirement. So let's say the contract is a woman-owned small business set-aside. 51% of that contract must be performed by a woman-owned small business prime and or her women-owned small business subs. The remainder can then go to non-WSP firms if the prime chooses. It's important to note that the prime selects the NAICS code to apply to a subcontract. A prime could subcontract work to a firm under a NAICS code under which the subcontractor meets the small business standard when they would not meet the standard assigned to the master contract. So, for example, a 500-person firm that would not meet the small business requirement of a master contract could be a sub to a prime contractor that has, say, 50 employees and does meet the small business requirement of the prime contract. Now let's look at the pros and cons of joint ventures. I want to preface my comments by saying that I am not an attorney. I strongly urge you to seek legal counsel if you are considering forming a joint venture. So with that in mind, let's look at some of the business issues you should keep in mind. On the pro side of the ledger, the new joint venture company can be formed to go after multiple solicitations and contracts. We typically recommend that you have at least 3 opportunities in mind to make the JV worth the investment. The JV can benefit from the bonding capacity of all member companies combined. Liability can be limited to the JV company if it is set up as an LLP. The JV may have a lower cost structure, making it more competitive, and this is especially important if price is a major source selection criterion. From the government's perspective, the resources of 2 or more companies are used to perform the work, which increases the probability of a successful outcome. Minority members of a JV may exert more control to protect their interest than in traditional prime-sub relationships. To your competitors and others who may be watching, it just looks better to be part of a joint venture than being a subcontractor to a competitor. Never underestimate the power of ego in business and in government contracting. Now let's discuss the potential downside of joint ventures. Each member of the JV may have liability for the legal obligations of the JV, which is the reason you should always seek counsel to ensure you understand the risks. Management issues or partner disagreements may be difficult to resolve and could result in delayed decision-making. This is usually caused by a lack of clear lines of authority, which is one of the things an experienced attorney will ensure is in place. Members of the JV may be locked into a relationship for a long time, longer than expected or desired. Inevitably, businesses change over time. Management, focus, priorities, skill sets, etc. And these changes can create challenges in the JV partnership. The member companies will likely be considered affiliated for small business size calculations. This means the JV may not be able to compete for small business set-asides if a member is a large business unless the JV is a mentor-protege under the SBA's All Small program, which we will address shortly. Another item for the con side of the ledger is risk. The government scrutinizes these partnerships very carefully. The lead contractor gives up control compared to the prime position. I have seen large businesses that are accustomed to being in the prime position struggle to come to grips with now being an equal partner with the small business and treating them with respect. The power equation changes, and this can sometimes lead to misunderstandings and conflict. The participating members become jointly and severally liable to third parties for the acts of their joint venture partners, including criminal acts. Choose your partners wisely, have good governance, and get good legal advice. And lastly, the government may view the joint venture as lacking a clear point of contact, thus raising concerns regarding control, authority, and accountability. These issues should be clarified and clearly documented in the proposal and in the contract. A legal entity will be created. It can be a corporation, a partnership, or an LLC. The government prefers LLCs. The joint venture can be populated or unpopulated. The government prefers unpopulated, meaning that the individuals that perform the work cannot be employees of the JV company. They should be employed by the member companies. The JV can, and probably should, for purposes of clarity and fairness, have administrative and management personnel on payroll. A number of new SBA rules on mentor-protege JVs make them worth considering. They are now available to all small businesses. Mentors may provide proteges with financial, technical, and management assistance. Mentors and proteges may enter into subcontracts. A mentor may own up to 40% of the protege company. Mentors and proteges may form joint ventures for set-aside contracts, which is what we've been talking about. But in this case, the mentor can perform 60% of the work of the awarded contract. Affiliation rules are waived, so it overcomes the limitation I mentioned previously. And agencies may provide incentives to mentor-protege teams. The new rules were approved 2 years ago, and it has encouraged many more JVs and mentor-protege relationships to be formed, which I think is a good thing. Having a mentor can substantially accelerate the maturity of a young growing business that is new to the federal sector. And finally, let's have a look at some of the particulars of the protege and mentor roles. The protege must be classified small under the primary and secondary NAICS code. If seeking approval under a secondary NAICS code, the protege must demonstrate prior experience and a logical business progression in that code. Generally, a company can have only one mentor at a time. However, a company can have only 2 SBA mentors ever, so you need to choose your mentors wisely. It is important to note that the SBA may examine small business self-certifications as part of the application process. Okay, so here are some of the parameters associated with being a mentor. Mentors may be large or small. Some of the most successful JVs I've seen have been comprised of a larger small business and a tiny small business. A mentor company cannot be a nonprofit. A company can be a protege and a mentor at the same time. Mentors can generally have no more than 1 protege, but they could have up to 3 proteges at one time if there is no adverse impact on any given protege. There's no limit on the number of proteges a mentor can have. The initial term of the mentor-protege agreement is 3 years and includes one option for an additional 3 years for a total of 6 years. Both parties must commit to 1 year. After that, either party may terminate the mentor-protege agreement after 30 days' notice. And the SBA must approve the continuation of the relationship each year and can terminate the relationship at any time. Prime, sub, or joint venture each has its place, its advantages, and its risks. In summary, here are the major points we discussed today. Conduct comprehensive research first so you can make well-informed decisions about opportunities to pursue and how to team. Understand the client, scope of work, and the roles and responsibilities of all parties. Understand the pros and cons of various types of teaming arrangements. Understand the motivations of all partners. And don't be afraid to walk away if there's not a good fit. Finally, seek legal advice and professional help from those of us who have been doing this successfully for many years. It will save you money and headaches.
Thank you for joining us today. Visit our website at scaletomarket.com and check out the Growth Masters Federal podcast channel. Contact us if we can help you in any way, and join Growthmasters Federal to gain access to members-only resources such as on-demand scheduled and live presentations and podcasts, and access to qualified professionals who can help you operate and grow your federal contracting business. Registered webinar participants are also entitled to a free 45-minute business development consultation with Mrs. Collier. Contact us to make those arrangements. If we did not answer your questions today, send them to questions@scaletomarket.com and we'll respond quickly. Join us again soon for another informative Growthmasters Federal presentation.